today? Yeah, that's fine. Okay. At 10:02 a.m., this meeting of the Mountain View Business School Board is called to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will now take a roll call of the trustees.
Bill Lambert.
Laura Berman.
Or Blakely.
Devin Conley. Let the record reflect that all 4 trustees are present. We'll move on to approval of the agenda. Are there any questions or comments regarding the agenda from trustees? Seeing as there are not this time, we'll go to public comment. If you're a member of the public and you would like to comment on the agenda, you can raise your hand in Zoom, press *9 on your phone, or approach the podium and submit a yellow sticker card. Seeing as there is no public comment at this time, is there a motion from trustees? Make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion made by trustee Berman and seconded by trustee Lambert. The agenda is approved unanimously. We will now move on to item 2A. This is our staff housing documents review and study session, where we will hear from Dr. Westover and our counsel, Phil Henderson. Welcome.
Are they able to hear now? Okay, great. Are we able to unmute and All right, so we have some documents to review for our staff housing project. We wanted to have this session with the board first, so you had time to ask as many questions as you wanted about some of the documents that we'll be bringing to the next regularly scheduled board meeting. We have Wynn Residential here with us to talk us through some of the documents, and maybe we can first start by maybe we'll start with the easiest first, is the application. Derek, are you able to walk us through it?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hello? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, give me one sec. Is this the same packet we had prior, Rebecca?
Yes, it's exactly what we went over with the staff housing committee.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't. Okay. Give me 1 second, please. Scrolling through here. I was under the impression it was going to be up on the screen. I wasn't aware, so just forgive me for a minute here.
I'll do that for you. Give me one moment.
Be a lot easier. This packet from Thursday, we didn't have the application in it.
Give me just a second, Derek. I'll put it up for you. So it's
Okay, thank you.
reviewed
This was the week before.
the week before.
Okay. Yeah, if you throw that up, that would really help.
All right, there it is.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, guys. All right, so this is a basic rental application. This is the first page. The first few pages are pretty straightforward. It's all of the kind of specific pertinent data for any of the applicants that come in wishing to apply. No major edits or updates to our typical application that we use. We do have one note at the top where a permanent U.S. residency is not required to apply. That has been an updated addition to the app here, and then as well as our rental selection criteria, noting that too as well. But as you walk through, it's like any typical app. It has personal information, address, place of employment, income and assets, any type of bank accounts, savings accounts you may have. And then just a signature and date here, confirming that obviously that the information provided is true and correct. We also, this application would be turned in, and there's additional supplemental application questionnaires for specific questions here that pertains to this community here in Mountain View. Obviously, the first one asking where their employment is, and then moving on through about any other applicants, any additional applications. So once this application is submitted, there is a $25 application fee that is paid along with it, and that would then be upon approval and selection of a unit. That $25 fee would actually be applied, towards the security deposit for the unit. So essentially, it's free, but there is a $25 fee that then, of course, is applied to the deposit. And the application that is submitted is utilized to process the app. We verify employment, place of residency, and rental history or ownership history. We do a credit and criminal background check too as well on every applicant that's over the age 18 or older. And then this just goes to here if they have any other sources of income, savings, any type of assets, asking if they have rental income or property. And if you kind of go on through, asking specific accounts, funds, checking, savings as well. And that's just certifying if there is no income, no source of income from any source whatsoever. And this should be the last page. And that's just asking if they get any type of subsidy housing, Section 8 voucher, etc. It's a simple yes or no question there. So yeah, this is what we call our application packet. And then what gets submitted with this, which I believe we'll be reviewing here too as well with you all, is a rental selection criteria. That form will back up and go into detail exactly what we're looking for and what the requirements are and the verifications that are in process as far as the application to rent an apartment at the community. Any questions or comments on the application?
Hi, this is Laura Blakely. I just wanted to comment that at the rental housing or the committee, with the oversight committee, we asked about the social security number and whether that was a hard requirement. And you informed us that it was not a hard requirement if somebody did not have a social security number. There were other ways to verify their application. So although the question is on there, it's not mandatory. Is that correct?
Yes, you are correct. Yeah, that was the added verbiage to top with the asterisk about that U.S. citizenship residency isn't required. Obviously, if you have Social Security, you list it there, but if it wouldn't be let's say if you didn't, it wouldn't be considered a denial or automatic denial reason. We would still proceed and process the application. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, we'll go over the resident selection criteria next.
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. All right, so this is our resident selection criteria. Again, this form is going to be delivered. This is handed with every applicant who applies for an apartment at the community. It's very very straightforward, kind of going over the different sections. You can see it talks about application fees. It does note there, we added some verbiage, the $25 per application fee. That is applied along and ran with the application, but then upon approval and selection of an apartment, that $25 would be applied towards, number 3 down here, which is our security deposits. The security deposits are kind of tiered based on floor plan. So a studio is 1,000, a 1-bedroom apartment would be 1,200, and then a 2-bedroom apartment would be at 1,400. One note, kind of caveat here that I wanted to note on the deposit. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Is there are other, you'll see down here as we go through pets, there's pets. Pets are allowed. Now there's typically a pet deposit or an additional deposit for a pet. But one note, as far as deposits go, a single deposit for a unit can't exceed 1 month's rent. So just something to take note of, which all those rents are under the value of the rent. Pets are accepted, and again, it's subject to a deposit amount. Application submissions and processing, this just kind of goes over pretty straightforward. This is where you would go and apply, and your application would be received and discussed with their on-site manager. Talking about credit, we do run credit history. We do a check of credit. We also do a rental verification and landlord verification as well. And we look for 2 years rental history or more, of course. But again, that's not an automatic. This is something that was brought up, or a denial should someone not have 2 years rental history. That's just kind of our standard threshold. Income, the income is we're looking for 2.5 times the monthly rent. So if the rent, was $1,000 a month, the minimum requirement to qualify would be $2,500 for that apartment for income verification. And that's combined, and that's gross income too as well. Criminal history and background, we do a full criminal history and background check on all applicants 18 and over that submits an application. And of course, everyone does have the ability to receive a copy of their report that's being ran. And then the BMR agreement is the BMR agreement. This section is referring to the BMR agreement in place here at the community at Mountain School, Wisman School District property. And this last bullet here is just referring again to the citizenship. I think Lori, you had asked about prior, but this is just calling it out here too again. So I've noted it on both documents, this rental selection criteria as well as the application to rent there. So. Any comments or questions on the selection criteria?
I have a slightly different version of this resident selection criteria. I want to go to the last page, might be useful, where you have the sort of the step through of the criteria for the tenants.
So here is actually in the copy room next door.
Okay.
Let me get this up.
So number 1, first selection goes to the employees of the Mountain View Wisman School District. The copy I have says the second is the employees of the city of Mountain View, 20 units. Has that been changed?
So what we did is we took it's still the same, but we copied the information that was in our agreement with the city and put it into number 2. So everything is exactly the same. There's just more language in number 2.
Thank you. The next question I have about this is, when will the sort of the decision be made to step through to the next tier of tenant selection? In other words, after you provide this opportunity for the employees of Mountain View Wisman School District to apply for an apartment, when do we go down to the next step of allowing, say, employees of the Los Altos Mountain View School District, et cetera.
So Derek, we talked through this a little bit at the meeting. Do you want to give the same explanation again?
Yeah, can you, sorry, could you, I was having a little trouble hearing. Can you repeat the question, the specific question on that last one?
Trustee Lambert was curious, when do we start to move through the list of applicants? And in our stuff, housing committee meeting, we talk through how it's going to be an ongoing process. And then as we see how the building is filling, we would come back to the staff housing advisory committee to discuss kind of next steps and when we start to do that. But Derek, you had information that you shared about just in general, how buildings like this tend to fill, and maybe you can share that.
Yeah. So we're gonna kind of just give you some background. So we're looking to start here in the next week or two to actually start pre-leasing of the units. So there's 144 total, 123 school district units, and then 20 city employee units, and then 1 unit's for our on-site maintenance supervisor. We're looking to pre-lease and fill these units. Looking at 2/1 February 1st is our initial goal for move-in dates. Of course, that's seeing we get CO of the building and are able to start working and living, having residents live on the property. It's going to be a gradual lease up phase process. We're estimating around 22-ish move-ins per month. That'd be a couple move-ins per day, give or take, throughout the process. We're really going to have, and then of course, in line with budgets and expenses and cost and receiving income, we're looking to start that, first full month's rents of the community would begin sometime in the beginning of March time frame. We have a slow gradual lease up, looking at full stabilization, which is around 90-92% occupancy by August 1st. And so we'll have, as far as kind of the waterfall effect, as far as the school district units, if there's some left and that remain, we'll know that it's going to be kind of a fluid process and ongoing as we go through the lease up. We'll have a really good idea over the next probably 45, 60, 75 days on how that looks, and where we're at as far as number of units left of the school district units, and then how many, if any, are left of the city units too as well. So as Rebecca stated, it's going to be a very fluid kind of ongoing process as we go through the lease up, which again will take us from now through August 1st estimate. So there's no really set, I guess, to answer the question succinctly, there's no specific set hard date time frame on when those would transition over right now.
Okay, so can you hear me through the mic?
Yes, I got you. Yep.
So what I'm hearing is that you expect to have a pretty good idea by March 1st about how many district employees are interested in moving in. And I'm presuming that about that time frame, then you go to the next step and to discuss with the oversight committee about opening it up to the other school districts.
That would be correct. That would be the next step. Yes, if we, as we get through these next few months of lease up and we're seeing, there's some units available, our interest list, we've called through and scheduled appointments and had application intakes and units selected, and we have some left. And yes, we would circle back and meet with the oversight committee members and have a meeting to kind of discuss next steps, and then that next waterfall for the next school district that's on there, number 2. Correct.
Great. Let me ask another question too. As you offer the to the in your experience, when you offer the rental units to potential tenants, do you tend to get a lot of people at the beginning, or, how does this happen over the next, you said 75 days?
They just lost you on my AirPods, but I can hear you okay. Yeah, so to answer your question, so right now I know we've had an interest list up and link. I can't remember what the last count was. Maybe give or take 75 plus-ish units. I don't recall. It's been a while since I've seen those numbers. But we've got a pretty hefty interest list from people who have gone on and shown interest and kind of did it's like a pre-qualification kind of interest list saying, hey, here's my first name, last name. This is the size of unit I'm looking at. This is, the date of time frame I'm looking to move in. So we've got a pretty good interest list built already that our on-site team, our manager and her team will be working from and calling. So I would say the beginning of the lease up is definitely very high pace and fast moving. Again, working off that interest list. And then as we go through, it'll be a kind of a steadier pace. again, our goal, this being a school, teacher in a school district building, we are in the middle of school season right now. So I can, again, anticipate a big, heavy pace at this beginning phase, the next couple of months, 2 to 3 months. And then just a normal steady, getting an interest here and there. But as we get towards the end of the school year, school session, I could see, or getting close to that, maybe people wanting to make changes. Some, we see in just generally even school teacher district buildings, just regular, call it market rate building. Definitely as we get towards springtime and summer, that is the busiest season on any type of property. And I can foresee that happening too as well. That pace and that interest getting picked back up towards the end of the school year, end of spring, beginning of summer.
Questions too. I mean, I assume that as we move towards summer and we're looking at hiring for the
Can't
next,
hear
we
again.
also want to have availability to invite new employees in.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that was one of the purposes of this structure. But I had a question about with the waterfall requirements. My understanding is if we do end up with, let's say, employees of MVLA or Los Altos School District, or even the general public eventually being part of the units, they would have to re-qualify every year, and we have the right to not keep them as tenants after each year so that we can open it back up to teachers. So that if, for example, we needed to fill spaces with, let's say, MVLA teachers to make sure our budget penciled out, they would only have the right to be there for a year, and then it would open back up to our staff. Is that correct?
Could you guys hear my last comment? I apologize.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Rebecca? You could hear? Okay. It's disconnecting. I'm on my AirPods. I apologize, you guys. It disconnected. So I wasn't sure if you heard my last, answer regarding the lease up process. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to answer, Rebecca. I think we were probably going to say the same thing, but yeah. So if someone were to move in like on the second, third waterfall, they would get that first full year. Then as soon as we start to build, if we had interest from additional teachers and there was no unit available, from that point in time, they would get to fulfill out their current lease term that they're in, whatever that contract expiration date is, plus one more year. That was our discussion. So that way, someone would, it's moving's a big haul and undertaking, right? So thinking that they're, especially if they're on the second or third waterfall of this program, thinking they may only have 12 months, they'd at least have that first year plus a second year. So I would say at least a 2-year tenancy in their apartment is what we discussed.
Was trying to mirror what we would do. So let's say we have a teacher that qualifies in the 80% AMI, and then sometime during that period, they don't qualify. Then we would copy the same format to where they would then try to re-qualify again. In this case, if they're in the 80% unit and there was not a 120% unit available, they wouldn't qualify. Then they would get an additional year before they would be requested to move out. So it was trying to mirror the same term that we would give our teachers. Part of the discussion, and the board can certainly make a different decision, is that if we do have to go to that waterfall, let's say a teacher from MVLA applies, and if they know I will maximum only have this for a year, most likely, they may not want to move into the complex. So by mirroring the same criteria that we would for our staff, we give them stability for a year was the thought.
I can't say that I'm thrilled with that, but I think the board will have to discuss it. Trustee Lambert?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we need to think of this in terms of not only providing the housing, but also providing housing security, right? And the idea that one would move into an apartment and then really not know whether one would have to leave fairly shortly, because a district teacher wanted to move in, or because a district teacher happened to get a raise this year and no longer qualifies for their affordable housing unit. If our objectives here are for, to provide what they are our objectives, to attract and retain teachers, I think we need to set up a structure that ensures that happens, that teachers are allowed to stay there or enabled to stay there for, up to their 5 years, which I understand is the maximum that we're talking about here.
Mm-mm.
For right now, we actually have not set any maximum. Teachers can stay as long as they'd like. That's been left open-ended. So currently, there's no maximum. I think everyone has the same goal, is to allow teachers to stay as long as they would like and as long as possible. Sorry.
They need to qualify, though. They need to be an employee of the district. If they
Yeah.
come to Mount View Wisman and then leave, they don't get to, yeah.
Correct. And that's part of that annual recertification or reapplication process, would be checking for that. One of the checks, yeah.
Housing expert here in the room. My understanding is that this would be, when you sign the lease, in effect, you have 2 years to stay there, should you want to. Is that correct? Am I hearing that right?
Yes, so if they qualify, they will get to stay for 2 years.
Okay, is that so if they move, if their income moves above the scale, then they have a 2-year place. Is it legal to allow them to stay for longer than 2 years, or is that sort of the maximum?
Well, that's part of the recertification annual checking process, as long as they qualify, right, and meet those requirements. Like Rebecca said, there's no time frame on how long they could live there. Yeah.
If they qualify at the 80% level and then their income grows, they can, that unit, we don't say these units are 80% units and these units are 120% units. We have, it's the number of units that are 80 and 120. So they could theoretically requalify at the 120% level and then not have to leave their unit.
That's correct.
Are you trying to seek city staff input?
I think Dr. Scully was asking, and then we get
Okay.
going.
Rebecca,
Great.
can you help with the courts?
All right, thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Wayne Chen with the City of Mountain View. I'm the housing director. And as Rebecca described it, the flexibility to stay for an additional year, if folks become over income, is in the BMR agreement and is sort of industry standard. I think what we could do is we discuss further the process and procedures, whether there's some flexibility around that. But what was described as sort of standard procedures of how we would do our other BMR projects, and even with 100% affordable housing projects that a nonprofit developer would develop. So it is modeled around something that is known, but again, we could maybe discuss whether there is some additional flexibility around that.
I think that's your interest, Mr. Lambert.
No, yeah. Thank you very much. That helped explain it. I was looking for some kind of flexibility or waiver, or, how do we accomplish our goals? Teacher housing is different than affordable housing throughout the city, I presume.
And to clarify what I said, I wasn't thrilled. What I wasn't thrilled with was the 2-year allowance for people who are not Mountain View Wisman School District employees. I think that should only be a 1-year allowance so that we can continue. Because what I envision is this is going to take time to fill out completely with our employees. That will start with a tranche of school district employees and then new hires for this coming year, for the 25-26 school year. But that it may take, 1 to 5 years to slowly rotate out any of those filled in spots that we have from the waterfall provision, and eventually get to full MVWSD occupancy. But in the meantime, this waterfall provision allows us to make sure that this is a cost neutral project that is not costing anything to the school district.
And I think the concern there is that if you only offer them the ability to stay for 1 year, they'll never come in the first place. So it's a fine balance.
Mhm.
I agree with that 100%. And,
Yeah.
another goal of this project is to break even, right? So
Right.
we have to fill these units, right? And
Mhm.
focus on the district teachers, but, right.
That's exactly it. Just to echo what you all said, that's the exact kind of thought process and the way the budget's built and everything, again, as for it to be cost neutral. you know, if we were to leave 20, 30 plus units vacant to wait for additional, you know, school district teachers, it would be a negative cash flow issue where the property wouldn't be able to pay for its expenses, operating costs, et cetera. So, yeah.
Over, since this is kind of a discussion format, I'm trying to figure out public comment, because I want to make sure we take our public comment, but not at the very end of the meeting. And if we continue in this format, we're going to get to the end of the meeting and not have taken public comment on this item. Would this be an appropriate time, trustees, to pause and take public comment?
May I make one other comment based
Yes,
on what we we're
Trustee
talking about?
Blakely.
I just wanted to share that at the housing meeting, Wynn had shared that typical like lease up, he said it's 92% is what we're considered fully occupied. And I know Trustee Lambert had thought that we would have a 5-year cap or some kind of cap to ensure turnover of units. But what we were hearing from this property manager who has a lot of experience in this space was that natural turnover happens anyway. And naturally there typically would be some amount of units that are unrented. So it sounded like the board is going to have to adapt a little bit over time, just depending on how it fills up and plays out. So.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I just want to add one more thing to that comment real quick. Yeah, you know, 92, the kind of the magic number and what we're considered stabilization here is 90%, which equates to 14 apartments that would be sitting open and available. Again, our goal is, of course, to get to 97, 98, 100 possibly. But our budget is conservative in the fact that we're looking at potential because of turnover, maybe not full interest, et cetera, as we go through the lease up and through stabilization. We're using that 90% threshold occupancy, which equates to, again, 14 units that would be available sitting at the property and still meet our operating and expense cost for the property as well.
All right.
You know, take public comments because I have more.
Yeah, if I could just make one more quick comment. This is Phil Henderson, legal counsel for the district. I think the point was, and the discussion is great because we've been talking about what I think that the city does for its BMR program and what Wynn experience is usually letting a tenant stay, if you will, for up to that year. In your current BMR agreement, the language regarding extension is up to 1 year. So the board does actually have some flexibility in that instance. I don't know that we'd have to necessarily revise it or go back. You do have some of that flexibility if you want to shorten that up. So I just want to let you know it's right now in the agreement, I believe, that you could do that if you wanted. So anyway.
All right, we will take public comment on this item. If you're a member of the public and you would like to comment, you can raise your hand in Zoom, press *9 on your phone, or approach the podium and submit a yellow speaker card. We need a timer. I'm waiting to see. We do want to make sure that the comments are available for the public as well, because I know there's a great deal of interest in this. So we can move a microphone over.
I can't hear.
Comment time for the study session portion of this meeting. And then when we go to closed session, we'll also have a public comment time for closed session before we go into close. Well, excuse me, hold on just a moment, Mr. Nelson.
I don't want to be recorded.
You don't want to be recorded?
But you don't have an option. It's a public meeting.
It
Right.
is a public meeting, so I think we have to actually make the comments available to the public if we're. Mr. Henderson, I don't know if you have. Okay, we have one speaker online and we have 3 speakers in person. Trustees, we could allocate 3 minutes and go up to 12, or we could allocate 2 minutes per speaker.
3 minutes as well.
I'm comfortable with that this time.
All right, so we will begin with 3 minutes. We're going to start with former trustee Nelson. Excuse me, we're going to start with our first speaker. You may begin.
Which is former trustee Nelson. Thank you. I'll wait for that to get sent down. Is it going to get set to 2?
3. You get
Oh, it is 3. Actually, I was going to congratulate the president and the board for actually allowing more public comment rather than all be stuffed in just this one place. So I guess I'll have to retract that back because if this is a long study session, there's things having to do with other parts of the documents that actually we want to have some comment on. So I hope the board overrules the chair and doesn't make this the only time when there's any public comment on this large study session. And remember, the majority of the board sets the rules. We could have had 2 minutes, for instance, would have been fine for this session, this thing, and then we could have another one farther along the way. But the board sets whether they want to operate with opacity and not listen to the community, or if they want to overrule the president and say, we'd like a little more community input. I'm glad you're worrying about how things are going to open up. One of the things that happened in our community, we have a thing that's been done for a long time. It's over in Santa Clara. They declare a 5-year term when they're going to allow people to do the below market rate because they want to enforce some turnover of their below market rate units. So they've been operating that now, I think, for more than a decade. So it isn't like nobody knows around here what is happening. We have people who are competing against other public school districts. There's a public school district, I think, South San Francisco or up in San Bruno, who's just opened their teacher housing the beginning of the year. So new teachers were able to come in. So the thing that President Conley has been talking about, is there going to be something open for new teachers who are coming to this district? Because one of the things wasn't just trying to keep older teachers here, but to provide a place to stay for new teachers. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Neil. Neil, you may approach the microphone.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. I just wanted to know that, like, if the district is paying the annual lease and if it isn't being filled and teachers in the nearby school district gets it, are they also helping to cover some of these fees, or is it just our school district that like picking up all the tabs while nearby district get the free ride? Because that would take away the funding of our students in our own district, and I don't think that would be fair. And if is a deficit, how this will be pay back to the district fund, and us, again, not dipping into the funding of our kids' education. And I would like to, the committee to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nancy.
Hi, thank you. Phil Henderson, legal counsel for the district, and Rebecca Westover, chief business officer. I have no doubt that the fiduciary duties involved in being good stewards of our public funds are significant. I can also imagine that managing the finances of a $100 million plus school district is a full-time job. Let's keep this in mind as I share the following. Overseeing this $88 million housing project is not a sidebar. Negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts is not a part-time gig. To date, the proper financial controls have not been in place at this district. We've seen this time and time again, and the superintendent's spending, including tens of thousands of dollars spent at the Ameswell Hotel, a premium hotel, occurred without the proper checks and balances on our public funds. Were these charges for a meeting that could have been held at our new district office or at one of our schools? I'm just guessing here. I'm guessing also that all of our teachers were not invited. And what are the district charges at Shoreline Golf Links? This needs to be addressed because who's responsible for providing the checks and balances here? Are the same people negotiating this $1.9 million ground lease? It's really time for transparency. It's time to make things better. This cannot continue. And here we are at a study session where the ground lease hasn't even been provided to the public from the district. We need the district to provide all of the information pertinent to this project. This is no longer the time for business as usual. In fact, in essence, this is a lame duck session involving failed leadership. We need transparency. And if this ground lease needs immediate attention, we need to find a temporary solution so the new board and proper leadership can address the problem. This just can't continue. We need to get the right people in place. We need transparency for the public. And you know, we can't have the same people that were supposed to be providing the financial checks and balances in charge of this multi-million-dollar project. Thank you.
Yeah, and to clarify, Dr. Westover, the ground lease is available on our website, yes? I know I pulled it up looking at, excuse me,
It's not part of the study session, though.
thank you.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Dr. Westover, the ground lease is, I was going through our old board meetings yesterday and found it myself.
The actual
been
ground
available
lease
for
has not
years.
been completed yet, but different.
Can you- The one that was approved in 2019 it is not
No.
the latest version, but we also have amended versions, yes?
The ground lease with NVO hasn't been finalized, or the draft of it. I'm not sure what has been made, what is available yet to the public. We have to go back and look at what version it was, but there were a couple of points to resolve with NVO related to insurance, et cetera. So we should find out what was the latest one that is available to the public. Yeah.
We'll post that with this materials at the next, as soon as this meeting's over.
And I'll also note that we're doing a review of our credit card process at our upcoming board meeting this Thursday. We will now go to our public comment online. We have one commenter online. Mr. Rutledge, you may unmute yourself when you are ready. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I can unmute, but I guess not unvideo. That's fine. The parents that I talked to do not believe this is a wise decision. I'm going to quote from the Brookings Institute article published earlier this year, quote, "Most local governments suffer from a chronic lack of capacity. Among the many constituent demands on staff time, public servants find themselves justifiably focused on core responsibilities without the capacity to envision and strategically manage a portfolio of real estate assets to maximize long-term benefits. It is not realistic to think that this reality will suddenly change," close quote. I realize that we're far along in this process, but before moving forward, the public deserves to see a complete pro forma and ROI of the same caliber as would be mandatory in private industry. Having done pro forma work for real estate development projects in the past, I can personally provide the board with an outline of what would be expected in private industry, and I see no reason why Mountain View taxpayers deserve anything less. I will go on to say that there are alternative, better ways to address the issue that this one is attempting to address. Adding friction into the marketplace is almost never the way to do it. So I really think this was a poor decision, and I'd like to see what we can do, what our options are to not move forward with it. And I am not alone in that, to be clear. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it possible to respond?
I mean, we don't have usually a back and forth. You can ask clarifying questions or clarify information if needed.
Well, I just want to point out that we have been discussing this as a board for many years, and that the voters in 2020, when they approved the bond that was passed in early March, the thing that was highest and was in the bond was construction of this project. And we have hired a third-party vendor, WIN, that manages affordable housing projects throughout the country, in part to take this off of staff. I think some of the other districts, I think the College of San Mateo and possibly Santa Clara did a lot of their management internally. And this board from an early time made clear that we wanted to have that outsourced to a professional expert so that it didn't fall on the shoulders of our staff. Some of the startup stuff inherently does, but I just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you.
Okay.
Can we do comments?
Please, I mean, we're kind of
Okay.
free-flowing through the study session. It's a little more informal. So you don't have to have me to tell you
Okay.
when to speak. You can.
Go-
speak whenever
Going
you
through the
feel free to.
packages here, one thing I would like to see is, this was presented at the Housing Oversight Committee, a budget spreadsheet for 2025 and 2026. I would like to see that expanded out for at least 5 years. Note the district does 3-year planning, and this is a real estate investment, and real estate investments are long-term, so I do think a minimum of 5 years budget projection would be important to have access to.
Okay. If the board is ready, maybe we can go on to the pro forma.
I
Derek?
just add that I think we can do that for the board. You're going to vote on this on Thursday. So that's something that between now and then we can add to the packet.
Right, I might suggest you speak with the city planning department. They probably
We have a meeting.
how they manage
we have a meeting
their
tomorrow about that.
properties.
Maybe something we can do as part of the packet, we had a budget narrative that was written to try to make it easier for the public to access the pro forma. And then there's the actual pro forma. Since Derek is here with us today, maybe we will skip over the narrative section and go directly to the pro forma and have Derek talk through kind of how they developed the budget, why they did what they did. Something that he mentioned in the staff study session, a staff housing study session, was that typically they see the first year as when they gather their data and their information. For example, what PG&E bills may run, utilities, things that they need for maintenance. And then they use those numbers that they gather during the first year, because right now it's their estimate based on the other properties that they manage to build out the out years. So they could use the assumptions they're using now, I'm sure, to build out 5 years of what they think it may look like, but it will be based on their estimates based on their other properties. So let me switch it over to Derek and I'll put up the pro forma.
Thank you, Rebecca. And that's exactly correct. Thank you.
All right, here it is.
All right, thank you. Can you make that yeah, thank you. So the attached document that everyone's looking at here, this is simply a roll up or a summary. It's a snapshot. And we can go to the but we can review this first. But the backup there's but let's review this real quickly. And then we can go to the additional backup, which is individual line items that back into all these numbers you're seeing here. There's 2 columns, so there's 3 columns. The first column here is essentially are the actual income, GLs, general ledgers, items, accounts, as well as the expense accounts below. The various income numbers at the top, which essentially is all for rental income. You can see the first column, second column there, 2025. That's we're calling our lease up year. That's this first lease up year coming into 2025 as we start moving people in February and March of next year. And then the far column there is a 2026 stabilized budget. Again, kind of off of what Rebecca was saying. Year one, we come into planning any type of new development, construction, full lease up of 144 units with obviously our experience, our sister-like competitive properties in the areas that we've done these in the past to build these numbers and utilize the various accounts and income and expenses. So 2025, if you want to go on to the next page, Rebecca.
Quick question.
Yeah.
We got a couple of questions on. So when we look at the rental income, it shows the rental income and below that says vacancy. Can you describe what's happening here? If you were like, what does this describe?
Yeah, perfect. So if you want to go, if you don't mind, it's really going to highlight it. So I know this is a lot of information, but thank you. This is exactly what I was going to talk to. So, like any budget, the first section, of course, is the income section. So the first line item there is rental income. So I'll kind of explain the columns here. Total, obviously, that's the annualized total date for the year. CPU, that's just an abbreviation for cost per unit. So every income line and or expense on this pro forma is broken down to a cost per unit to break it out. And then, of course, you've got January through December for the 12-month year. If you look at rental income here, as we scroll through, you'll see it has the $377,450. Essentially, that's being, of course, looking at 100% occupancy, that would be the rental income amount on the first of each month if everyone paid rent on the first, and we posted all monies. Right below that, offsetting that is the vacancy line. So it's a little confusing when you see this. I'm saying that we're not moving people in until February, March timeframe and receiving income. We recorded on the budget though to show what the full potential charges are for the property at all 144 units, which would be that $377,450. Right below that is a vacancy line. That's backing out and offsetting the rental income. That's considered. So you can see January and February essentially is a net zero for rental income. We won't have any occupants, anyone living on property for January or February. But if you look at March, that's essentially going to be our first month where we'll have a steady amount of units in there. We're again showing 377,450 is full potential rental income for the community, but our vacancy number has dropped around $64,000. So we're assuming we're going to have $64,000 of rental income in from the number of occupants living at the property. And then, as I discussed earlier, this is a gradual phase lease up. Then going in from March then to April, you can see it drops another big chunk, and then through May, June, July, and then after July, effectively August 1st, again, our assumption is will be what we call stabilized. And that's that 90% number I was referring to earlier here, which equates to around 14 units vacant. And that keeps us stabilized through the remainder of the year at that same rate. So August through December, that's essentially, again, our stabilization period through the end of the year. And that'll have us at 90% occupancy. So, and then if looking very high level, and so you can see here on the operating income, the next chunk is operating expenses. We have your admin, payroll, marketing, utilities, maintenance, activities, and so on. As you go through, it even has the ground up lease payment there. Just to jump down right where her arrow is, you can see the NOI, the net operating income, or the net of year one, the 2025 budget is a little about $17,000 to $18,000 net operating income. So that's very close, very tight. And again, for a cost neutral plan and project, a $5, $7, $6 million potential income project sitting here at, right around 17, 18K of NOI at year end. And again, that's with a conservative 90% stabilization, August through the end of the year. And then below this, again, this is all here. Below this, it breaks down that dark blue line where it says expenses. It'll break. Yeah, here you go. If a little bit right there at the bottom, it actually goes into the details of the expenses. It's right at the end, isn't it? Right. Yeah, right around there. So yeah, you got your admin. So above, if you're looking at the higher level above under operating expenses, admin has that total. Well, below here, starting at the bottom of this page here, you'll see as it goes through the expenses, it calls out every individual line, even postage, what the postage fees we assume are, telephone cost, any legal expenses that may come our way, bank fees, copy machine, etc. So if you go on to the next page, it'll continue on through to admin costs, which of course is payroll. We'll have, to quickly call out here, we'll have the site structure for the management team will be a property manager, an assistant manager, and then a maintenance supervisor and a maintenance technician. So we'll have 2 in the office and 2 maintenance team members at the property. And then our maintenance supervisor, again, will be living on site and we'll be able to handle any after hours, emergencies, call outs, calls, things like that. And then it moves on through more expenses, again, payroll, marketing, and the utilities here. Electricity, gas, water, sewer, trash, and so on. So if you keep going, Rebecca. Maintenance expenses. So this is obviously a big chunk, a big cost to the property. We have pest extermination or pest control, trash removal, security, grounds contract, which is our landscape maintenance and services throughout the community, cleaning supplies, maintenance supplies, and then just various repairs and potential costs that may come. One line item there is that shared amenity cost. The arrow, it looks like the arrow, or that's my arrow, isn't it? Right above, right there. Yeah, that shared amenity cost. That is, so this community, as you're all aware, is there's a couple additional market rate sites that Greystar is overseeing on the community that our residents here, our teachers, city employees, and all other residents of our community will be able to utilize the amenities at the sister property next door. There's pool, spa, there's a yoga and fitness center, underground parking garage, which is where all our residents will be parking and have a reserved parking space for their apartment. So on and so forth. And so our cost, the percentage of the cost for our community is 20%. 80% of all of those cost fees, repairs, maintenance, services, et cetera, for all of those various amenities and structures at the community. 80% of that is being handled by the other properties. Our amount is 20% of that cost, and that's that $224,760 for the year. And then we have, some resident activities. We plan little events, things like that. And then it goes through the total bottom. You can see that to the bottom line expenses is around $1.3 million for year one for the lease up year in 2025. And then I believe it kind of goes through 2026 is the next. Yeah, then this is 2026. And one thing to note here, again, this is 2026 was loosely done. Again, as Rebecca stated right before we review the pro forma here is we start planning and prepping budgets. We'll start planning this property's budget for 2026. Probably right around June, this upcoming June in 2025, and we'll actually have some true hard numbers, right, from the first 6 months of lease up and property operations to build off. But just to throw it together here, we used 2025. We simply took our December month in totals and moved them over for all of 2026. And one thing to note, if you notice, the rental income amount is still at $377,450. We didn't implement any rent increase for the community on any single one of those units. Again, this is, not saying that that's guaranteed, but just for number purposes here for 26, dumping in that December number of $377,450 for income. There's no increase, as Rebecca said, to utilities. PG&E is a big one every year. It's one of our highest increases, unfortunately, percentage wise, but not attributing any of those potential increases and dumping in the income. You can see the NOI right now is showing a $300K amount for 2026 with no increases. Again, we haven't, just to clarify, so if someone's looking at this, we haven't put any other increases, percentage, things like that will come into us, that when we start prepping for 26, this upcoming summer, that we'll have in our hands at that time. So we'll have a more accurate budget for 26 sometime this upcoming summer in 2025. But again, we just wanted to have that here just to show the property still is self-sufficient and can operate and maintain itself even as of right now at the current rents that we'd be charging for year one. So.
To clarify, in future years, as the AMI guidelines for the county from the state increase, we will also see corresponding increases in rents, but only for new rentals. Do they get locked in, Dr. Westover, at their original rental rate, or does it go up each year?
So their rental rate can go up each year. I think the goal is to make this, there's many options that we have available to us. By setting the rents as low as we can, it means that if our expenses increase, we would need to increase rents in order to keep up with the expenses. If we kept rents the same from when they moved in, there would likely be a cost to the district. So rents would need to increase as the costs increase. Something that the city shared in some of our staff housing meetings was that if we wanted to try to moderate what increases would be, we could set the starting rents higher. So then as our expenses increased, we could control how we would might need to increase rents over the years. But I think in the discussions, we wanted to keep it as low as possible and only pass on the direct cost as opposed to setting them higher to start with.
Right, and we could possibly pin to like the COLA, for example.
I think it would be tricky to pin it to the COLA because PG&E has been raising their prices past COLA. So if the cost of running the building increases, we would need to pass that cost onto the residents, unless
You could perhaps provide a cap, give people some security.
I think that's something that could happen, but if we provide a cap and PG&E raises their rates 20 times, then the district would be taking on the cost of those PG&E bills. That's the danger of putting a cap on. So I think right now, the general thought has been, we want to keep rents as low as possible. And then if the cost to run the building increases, we would have to pass that on to the residents. Alternatively, if we're concerned about rate increases each year, we could set rent a little bit higher to give us a buffer in the years out.
Just one more comment in response to one of the comments from the public. The reason that we are allowing, if it doesn't fill up, employees of the other two school districts and possibly the city to occupy this is in order to keep that rent coming in, have the rental income pay the costs. So this is not something that the district is taking on its back to help out other school districts.
I think exactly that, looking at the pro forma cost per unit, each unit is responsible for paying its portion of the cost of the building.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of questions. So clearly what dominates the expenses is the ground lease. Could you, in words, tell us what the ground lease covers? And then I really would appreciate having a sort of a spreadsheet of, in paper, what the ground lease covers, and so that the public can be aware of that. And me.
I'll a relatively brief answer, Trustee Lambert. The ground lease, we don't own the property that the building we built on is on, so we have to lease the real estate, the ground from the owner of the property. So that's what the ground lease is there for. And it, was after quite a bit of negotiation with the developer to get to that draft ground lease that we're at. In fact, we're still negotiating a little bit of it, which is why this board we haven't done a final one to share it with the public. So we're at that point. So that's
Solely for leasing the land.
correct.
It's 1.8 acres and roughly $15 million, $20 million at most.
At a time, yes, when it was priced, and I don't know what the current acre cost in Mountain View is, but it's somewhere probably between 10 and $18 million an acre, if I were to guess. But again, I'm not a real estate appraiser.
Next question I have is, I know, clearly as we get up to full occupancy and as there, let's call them startup costs. And I noticed roughly looking at the spreadsheet, there's about $500,000 in deficit projected for the first 6 months of this project or so. Is that what we approved at the last board meeting, the 300,000 to offset that?
Yes, so when you look at the pro forma, there's a $300,000 short-term loan that's going towards the district. It's our account.
Yes.
And then it's coming back. So you'll see in the pro forma, it shows a negative that's being coming back to the district before the end of the fiscal year. So that's exactly what was approved.
And just to be clear, this money is coming out of our general fund?
Yes.
Yes. Is there a way going forward that we can manage a contingency fund that to offset, let's say unexpected deficits in this project?
So
that do not have to withdraw from our general fund?
Yes, that's the goal. So in the pro forma, they actually have an amount they put away each month to cover that, because we know long-term that we'll need to maintain the building, meaning new roofing, new carpet, all of those pieces. So that's being put away into an account. So this
Rebecca, did you want to pull up? Maybe you can call that out real quick. That's a great question, but we can highlight that here real quickly on the pro forma.
Yes.
There's a reserve set aside for unit. I believe it's $144,000 annual, being reserve set aside, for that exact reason, in case something comes up unexpectedly. Go up to, yeah, it's on the call at high level too. Yeah, right there. The operating reserve and replacement reserve. You could see if you go to, yeah. So again, the stable, it's because we're not starting until later in the year, but a full year of annual reserve savings there's an operating reserve of 144K and an additional replacement reserved amount for 144K. If you go down, Rebecca, to the detailed, you can see where it starts kicking in as you scroll through. Again, not until, there you go, right there. That's where it starts kicking in August. We pushed it out to August to start collecting that back. And then if you go to 2026, that should be, this will be more of a kind of a clear, normalized, there, yeah. Now you can see cost per unit's $1,000 for the operating reserve and replacement reserve separately. So annually together combined of $288,000. Just kind of look at what a normalized year looks like, stabilization January 1 and on. And those funds are again being put away, like you said, similar like a contingency fund or an account, but similarly reserve account that would afford and be able to pay for any unexpected costs or issues at the property.
Here's sort of a perhaps crazy idea, but
Mhm.
anything to try to minimize the potential for having money taken out of the general fund for whatever reason. State very much wants, is supporting affordable housing and supporting teacher housing. We passed a bond to pay for at least the construction of the affordable housing. This is a long-term project. It's certainly something that's appropriate to be funded by bonds. And I wonder if
Mhm.
it's possible asking the state to give us a break and have us make it make a contingency fund that was funded by the bond, and basically putting a couple $1 million aside to cover
We,
expected expenses. In
a
other
great
words-
idea.
In other words, you know, just like with the city, affordable housing comes with public costs. And we need to be sort of protected from those costs if we're helping to meet the state's objectives.
I think it's a great idea. We had actually, Phil Henderson and I, as well as we reached out to bond counsel to ask. And from bond counsel, the way things are set up right now, we're not able to use the startup costs for that. So we can't pull from our own bond to provide alternatives of what's within our ability right now. That doesn't stop us from reaching out to the state and asking questions. And we can definitely do that. We could also pull from our building fund as opposed to pulling it from the general fund. So general fund, you can fund anything within the school district. Our building fund will fund just building. So that's another option that we could do that's within our control right now. But we can reach out to the state and just have ask an open-ended question, to your point.
I'd really encourage you to look into that. Thank you.
And that's something that we can also bring to our state legislators as well, I believe.
Yeah.
And advocate around, because I think that's a very good idea. And Dr. Westover, you said we can't pull from the bond for startup costs. Can we pull from the bond for long-term contingency? If we wanted to set aside a contingency fund? No?
Go for it.
The short answer is, sorry, I apologize, I'm the lawyer. Probably no. And the reason why probably no, operating costs, ongoing lease payments, financing payments, those kind of things cannot be paid for out of bond funds. Probably has less to do with the state, more to do with the IRS code, and the bondholders that bought your bonds don't want it to be undermined because we can't use it for operating expenses. And my guess is replacement costs and the operating a fund that we're creating wouldn't be appropriately backfilled with bond funds.
There aren't any matching state, at one point, school districts were supposed to get 50% of any bond monies that they spent on school facilities back from the state, and that never happened, or the money got depleted. There's nothing like that that's still on the books, is there?
Well, Prop 2 passed, and it's 11:10. Well, I could talk till about 3 o'clock if you'd like about how the state bond program is run. But the short answer to your short question is there are state bond funds. They are generally used for classrooms.
Right.
Trustee Lambert, you're correct that the state is very interested in creating housing. They haven't exactly created a fund for housing yet. So they're advocating and, our state superintendent Thurman is talking about it, but I haven't seen a check yet. So we can ask, but I wouldn't count on the state to suddenly come up with a fund, but I would I'm more than encouraged to advocate for that if we can.
And if the BAFA thing that got killed locally
Mhm.
for this election cycle, if that were to resurrect in a couple of years, would that typically only be for new projects and not to help
Not a
out projects like this?
Boy, I'd have to look at it. I don't think it was set up for reimbursement, which is kind of what you're asking.
New.
Yeah, exactly. The state bond program can reimburse depending on the project. And we're expecting Prop 2 to roll out like the school facilities program. But again, we're all waiting to see how Prop 2 rolls out.
Can I suggest, we've got, as you pointed out, we have 20 minutes left here.
We have about 20 minutes. We have 2 documents to review still. So maybe I'll hop over. Derek, maybe we'll do MVWSD versus 777 rents.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll kind of explain just the simple shell, the template here. There's a lot of data, a lot of information. So columns A through M, or yeah, through M there, that left side, set title at the top, floor plan comparison. This is just what we call like a market survey. This is a survey of competitors and properties of similar like style year, although some of these are older and different unit types, but to give us an idea of the market as far as rental rates. The blue 777 Middlefield, that blue highlighted one is the one we're focused on. And when we're doing our comparison to, that's our neighbor, our sister property next door. That's the market rate site. So if you can kind of scroll down, let's use this section here first, Rebecca. So there's the studio, just to call out some, and we'll move over to the right in a minute here, but just to call their out separately here, their rates. Their studios, column K, use that column K number, that 3,665. Again, this is a little bit older, a survey, but these are trending rates and in the anticipation of what they'll be charging at the property next door, potentially even more. My guess is probably going to be a little more, but we'll use these amounts here. So their studios are going to start at 3,665 per month. And then moving on down to the one bedroom, their one bedrooms will start a little over $4,048 per month. And then their two bedroom floor plan, those are going to start at $5,722 per month. So if you could scroll up, Rebecca, and we'll kind of put it in perspective. So this first section here, it says MVWSD, rent versus income. So this just a quick snapshot here. This is just to show our unit types, our studio 1 and 2 bedroom at the 80% set aside there. You know, our rents, our studios will be at $1,350, the one bedroom at $1,450, and then the two bedroom is at $2,150. And then over to the right, the 120% AMI, our studios will be at $2,400, one bedroom at $2,900, and the two bedroom at $3,400. So, and then in the orange, that little light colored orange table there, that's just showing, you know, using our 2.5 times the monthly rent calculation, you know, which we reviewed earlier on the rent selection criteria, just to show what those rental income or those rental rates and what the required income would need to be at 2.5 times the rent monthly, and then what that is annualized out. And then the same thing over to the right for the 120%. And then the table right to the right is kind of an apples to apple comparison using their rent rates. Again, that's their starting rates. And so they'll have a large range. These are the low end of their unit types. And then to the right, showing at the same 2.5 times calculation for rent, what that monthly income equates to. So you can see a studio is a little over 9,000, a one's at 10,000, and then there are two bedrooms at 14,000. And then that's that same monthly amount annualized out. There just to show the differences on the income requirements, whether you were going to live at our community or their community. And I would also, they haven't confirmed, but I would also guess that they're probably going to be at least at a 3 times rental income requirement, rental rate calculation. That's typical of a market rate property. Some are even at 3.5 times the rate. But that's just showing an apples to apples, and you see the difference of income there required to property next door. And then here, this table right a little up, sorry, Rebecca, a little up, right to the left. Sorry, the one right under the orange one, go left a little bit. Yeah, right there. MVWSD versus the 777 Middlefield Gray Star. So this is just a side-by-side comparison. Our studio 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom rates versus theirs. So after 80% set aside, you can see in that the blue shaded column is showing the delta, the variance. Our studio is $2,315 less per month. Our 1 bedroom is about $2,600 less per month. And then the 2 bedroom is slightly under $3,600 less per month. And then even moving over to the 120% units, we're still, you know, around $1,300 at the studio less. The 1 bedroom is $1,148 less, and then our 2 bedroom floor plan is a little over $2,300 less per month. So that's just giving you a nice side-by-side comparison, showing just how much of a savings and what a great rental rate each of these unit types are at our community.
All right, questions, or I can keep us moving to go on to the terms and conditions sheet.
So one thing that, you know, when we first put this in place, I came on the board in 2018 and not December. And a lot of the discussion, I've pulled all of the previous meetings that I could find for the 2017 on, A lot of the discussion about actually planning this took place even before I came on the board, and the ground lease was approved that March in 2019. And what our teachers were making was different then, right? And granted, the cost of living has also gone up, so this AMI reflects that cost of living. But I'm concerned about some of our staff, let's say there's a second income included, fall into that missing middle category that's between these AMI cutoffs from the state, but actual cost of living here and being able to afford to live here. Do we have any options for trying to address that missing middle population at all?
Do you mean like doing 100%, making some units 100% instead of 120 or?
No, if there's an option for like 120 to 150 or something like
Okay.
that. Because that's where people can't actually afford these other units that Greystar is offering or comparables, but they don't qualify at 120%.
Yeah, I'm going to try to think of a short answer to the question, but is there flexibility that it would frankly have to be probably a discussion with the district and the city, because we have the BMR agreement is in essence an alternative to the established BMR program. So to the extent it is covered or not covered in the BMR agreement, whatever's covered controls, whatever is not covered, like increasing income limits or maybe even relieving some of the units of any income requirement, we'd probably have to go back to the city to have that discussion, because again, this building, our building, there's 144 units, were the BMR compliance for the overall project. So that's why the city approval was given for that particular building in that particular project. So if we're looking for relief from that, it would probably be a discussion with the city. Yeah.
Are there other questions on this document? Okay.
Okay, moving over to the terms and conditions.
All right. So this is our terms and conditions of lease. So obviously, once someone has gone through the application process and been approved and selected an apartment, when the time comes prior to the move-in date, the property manager and team will type up the rental agreement, which they will come in on move-in day, get their keys, pay their deposit, full deposit, and get their, sign their lease. So these call outs here are related to the application process as far as some of the fees and costs before move-in, and then moving on through just the other rules and conditions of the community that we've discussed and put together for the community and the rental agreements. First one is the application fee. Again, as noted prior, it's $25 per app for anyone in the age of 18 or over will complete an application and pay that $25 application fee, which again is then credited towards their security deposit upon move-in. Security deposit, first year, this is moving in. They don't, as part of the recertification process, of course, when they, every year come up and get a renewal offer and sign another 12-month term, they don't pay a new deposit. This deposit stays with the apartment throughout the life of their tenancy in the unit. Those are just the rates based by floor plan. And then the rental rates here, again, coming off of what we just discussed, these are not to exceed. These are maximum rates for the first year. And noted off that 120% rental rate chart that we just reviewed. Pets, simply yes. A lot of our communities, some are not, pet friendly, others are. And so this is just saying yes. There's majority of our properties charge $35 to $50 for each pet, typically up to 2 or 3. We're charging no pet fee here at this community. So if someone does have a pet, there's no additional, fee or rent cost for that pet. The deposit for a pet is $500. If they have a second pet and or a third, which we're allowing up to 3 for this community, would be $250 for each additional deposit. And again, one extra caveat, as it's noted here, subject to law, is which just passed July 1st of this year. If I'll try to spell this out. So if you scroll up just a tad, Rebecca, up to the deposit. So let's say someone's moving into a studio, their apartment, they're at the 80%, their rent is $1,350. They pay the $1,000 deposit and they have a pet. So that puts them already at $1,500, which is $150 over the required amount by law, which is 1 month's rent. So what'll happen is that calculation would still be done, but we would then back out if their security deposit plus pet or any other deposits that would be added up to a grand total pet deposit amount. In this example I'm giving is $1,500. We'd back out and reduce to match 1 month's rent. So it would be $1,350 deposit. I just wanted to note that. We would never exceed 1 month's rent. Renters insurance, we do have a requirement here. And of course, they're able to go with their own carrier who they use for anybody else, for their car, for example, to add on renters insurance. Parking fee, each resident, each unit, well, I should say this, each unit will get a resident, reserved parking space. Laundry fee, this of course is a guesstimate. There will be laundry facilities at the community, washers and dryers, I believe 3 washers and 3 dryers, in each laundry room. That's an estimated cost per wash and per dry based on neighboring communities. Keys, residents will receive keys at no charge. They'll have fob keys, which is a digital key card that every unit will be tied to and linked up. So if they scan their key card to get into an amenity area, it'll note, who was in and who was out. But those keys come at no cost unless they want an additional fob key. That's a $50 refundable deposit, which they would get back at move out. So as long as they turned in their fob key when they moved out. Clubhouse community space rental. There's really no fee here. This is an option. There is a really nice on our community kitchen clubhouse area with an outdoor patio area too as well. If they wanted to reserve it for, a private event, it would be a $500 deposit, which they would return. So as long as nothing was damaged, of course. Maximum days for visiting guest of a tenant. This is pretty standard. This is 7 days. Basically after 7 days, if someone was still staying there, how it looks and how it works kind of on our side, they would be considered an occupant at that time and would need to fill out an application and get on the lease. However, we've discussed this. This is handled and managed internally at our site. It's simple, and this would be part of our move-in process when every applicant moves in. We would let them know if you do plan on having family, friends, guests come visit you for more than the 7-day period, just give us a heads up. We'll make note of the file, and there will be no other paperwork or additional paperwork need to be done because we do understand some guests may be here longer than 7 days. Satellite dishes, again, they have the ability to, if they'd like to have a satellite dish, there are requirements on our addendum that the installer would understand and know how to install. The internet, there is an internet service being offered and provided. It's $10 per month. Alarms, packages, and smoking. We will have designated package locker system here at the community. And then no smoking around on the community, on the property, or inside the apartments too as well. And I think that was the last one. Yeah. Okay.
Then maybe just to talk through with the board a little bit. I know we have 2 board members that come to each meeting. Bill has been there frequently. The Staff Housing Oversight Committee has been helpful in developing this from discussing pet rent. So that's one reason we do not have pet rent is because teachers, we want them to have pets. So we remove the pet rent because it's not necessary. We're not looking to make money off of pets. The similar discussion occurred when we were talking about the shared amenities and how staff might have access to them.
Thank you. And I've been watching the meetings online, so yes, Bill.
Yeah, just looking through some of the documents, I think a couple of other things the tenants have here is guest parking availability to a certain extent. And I think I read that they have storage areas in the parking area that might want to be included here to let people know what they're paying for.
And there's bike storage too. Yeah.
All right. Are there any further questions or comments from trustees at this time? Okay, I think we're going to move on to item 3, the opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda, unless trustees feel otherwise.
So just to put a cap on this, what do you need for Thursday night to approve this? We can't do an hour and a half again on this. So we will, in our introduction, say that we've discussed this. We've gone over it. There was a study session you can watch. But we need to know what you want Rebecca to do between now and Thursday that you need. I think there was one point that you made about a 5-year workout. I think that's a fairly easy task, but that's the only other thing I heard. So I think what would be helpful on Thursday night, in the interest of time, is to say, hey, we had this discussion. There's general, agreement on this, and we're ready to approve these things. Fair?
Yeah, just on the 5-year thing. I mean, did was there strong feelings about whether that should be included? My understanding from the housing committee was, let's see how it evolves over time, that in all likelihood, there wouldn't be a need for that, but the board at a later date, if there were, could impose that.
I have no problem asking for a 5-year pro forma. I don't think that.
Oh, I
that's-
thought you were talking about a cap on, I'm sorry, I
No,
misunderstood.
No, he's
The
asking for
pro
a,
forma.
for a,
Oh,
for
sorry, I
extending the
misunderstood.
pro forma.
Just my thoughts is there's enough known about, sort of cost of utilities, cost of everything that's going on. We have a track record for in Mountain View. And it just seems to me any long-term project like this, we really should at least, it's not perfect, but at least get a start. Right?
And I think what I heard from Lynn is that you are conservative in your costs and conservative on your revenue, just like the district tries to be with its budget, so.
All right.
That is correct. I can barely hear you, but that is correct.
All right, we will move on to item 3 then. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board regarding the closed session agenda. If you would like to address the board in person, you can submit a yellow speaker card and approach the podium. And online, you can raise your hand in Zoom. Let's see how many speakers we have. We have 1 speaker online and 1 in person. Oh, 2 in person, excuse me. So we'll put a 3-minute timer up. And we'll get the microphone set up. All right, former trustee Nelson, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm glad trustee Lampert asked for the ground, this is on the ground lease information. This, whatever version this is, it doesn't have a date on the front of it. So it really makes it hard for anybody to follow what the heck is going on, because this ground lease that you're going to be negotiating now, price in terms of payment, has already been signed, has already been passed. But what version is this? This is ground lease. What version? Version 5? Is it version 6 now? There is opacity in what you're doing on these financial stuff. And the problem is, Conley, is we don't like opacity from you. We don't like opacity from this board. We don't like opacity from this organization. And that's what you're continuing to do. So we really would like to have things when it says ground lease, what version this is, because you already have an in effect ground lease. Now, if there are modifications that you're proposing to the ground lease that has already been signed, that should actually show up as modifications underlined or some other way. This should be, I guess this is the one that's currently in place, only it doesn't have any dates on it. It says 2023, but there's no date as when it was entered into on page 1. This is an example of the fiscal irresponsibility, I think, of this board and of you, President Conley, and the 2 trustees who are going off, and some of it falls on you, Dr. Lampert. So realize that when you start losing the community trust, as you have for this whole issue about the California State Department of Education doing an extraordinary fiscal audit on this organization, this is what we want to see you to change. And I really hope we no longer have Conley running as president after the new organization, because she's shown she isn't responsive to the community asking for more community input. This thing I asked today is some extra time on those 3 other items that were coming up, that a little bit of community comment. That is pro forma of the way that she operates, particularly as the chair of the meeting. And so, board, I ask you to go in there and understand what the heck is being asked differently. We don't understand what the great benefit for our community to having yet another ground lease. And it isn't explained what the differences is going to be. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, our next speaker is Nancy Actor.
Hi, thank you, President Conley. I'm starting to feel like our district has constructed this BMR housing to support a developer, other districts in the city. I'm going to restate that the same people who failed to provide oversight at our superintendent's spending are going into the negotiation room for this ground lease. Why is this negotiation not public? Please post the most current version of the ground lease for the public. Make it easy for us to find it. Has anyone looked into forming an LLC for this project to insulate the district from any long-term risks? What have we done to protect the district in this situation? What can still be done? Did I hear correctly that with the ground lease, we're paying 20% of fees for amenities like a pool and a gym for this below market rate housing? Can that portion of the ground lease be somehow renegotiated? 1.8 acres, was it $2 million per acre? Again, I ask, who's in charge of negotiating here? Who's responsible for the controls? Speaking of controls, I'm not an accountant. I am not a Brown Act expert. I'm a mom and a taxpayer, and I can read through agendas. When I was looking through the agendas in preparation for this meeting, I came across a resolution to authorize a temporary borrowing between funds. This was passed in June of this year, and it was of particular interest to me because I have concerns about our district borrowing funds that could be used for school facilities and education for this project. The June 2024 resolution states, the Mountain View Westman School District's Board of Trustees hereby authorizes for fiscal year 2023-2024 temporary transfers between any funds of the district as instructed by the superintendent or his designee, and authorizes the Santa Clara County Treasurer to honor warrants drawn on those funds, etc. Of note, I've seen no such resolution for 2024-2025. Is that resolution in place? There's been talk about transferring funds around, and I feel like it's some sort of shell game that's about to happen. Let's make sure we have the proper agreements and resolutions in place. Let's think about a temporary solution or consider all options outside of the four corners of the current ground lease document to protect our school district and our school district's funds while the new board gets put into place. Thank you.
Dr. Westover, to clarify, at our previous board meeting, one or two ago, we approved a resolution specifically for transfer of funds for this project, yes?
Yes. So at the previous board meeting, the board, we wanted to make sure that there was more, in an effort to try to create additional transparency, we wanted to bring a second resolution to the board to make that transfer for staff housing. We typically also always bring a resolution to the board for temporary borrowing so we can make payroll. Several meetings prior, we talked about cash flow within the district because we are a community funded district. We receive cash 2 times a year and our payroll is approximately $8 million a month. So in those in-between periods, we do inter-fund borrowing to make payroll for when the cash comes in.
And regarding the examples of the ground lease that are online right now, is it possible to update them so that they show the date that was passed on the cover page?
So I'm going to probably allow Phil to answer this in more detail, but the ground lease, this has always been part of the negotiations and has been in different documents throughout, I think, since before my time. So before 2018, I believe. So there's been versions of like, what does that ground lease look like? But there's definitely, we can always put it in one spot so you don't have to look back through different board meetings to find it.
Thank you.
And I'll just say about the budget transfers, that's done by every district in the state and, must be done as you work through your budget. So that's just a boilerplate thing that every district does.
Thank you. We'll take our online speaker. We need to get that 3-minute timer back up real quick. All right, Ms. Rutledge, you may unmute yourself when you are ready.
Hi, thank you. 2 general topics. First, I want to say, as Laura Blakely pointed out, taxpayers did vote in favor of the bond, but they voted for it based on the belief that it would meet a set of objectives, which frankly, it's not clear that it will meet. Devin raised a great point, suggesting that most teachers would not qualify. So we really need to be clear about the objectives of the program, and I'd like to see measures of success documented and monitored. Okay, second general theme, I'm going to be a stickler, so let me first explain my qualifications. Although I'm recently retired, I have a degree in finance from the Wharton School, and I was previously VP of Finance with a Fortune 100 company. So I feel that I can speak with authority. First of all, financials should always include at least 3 schedules: an income statement, a cash flow statement, and a balance sheet. This is Accounting 101. The income statement that was shared today puts money into an operating reserve and a replacement reserve, but there's no balance sheet provided to show those assets building up on or being drawn down when needed. In addition, since allocations to reserves are not cash flow, the income statement that was provided is not helpful for understanding when there may be cash shortfalls. Number 2, there should be a replacement reserve schedule that includes line items for every item that will need replacement, the expected life of those line items, and the year in which funds will be required. That schedule should go out for 40 years to show that there are adequate funds for replacing the roof at that time. There was a conveniently quick review of the income statement lines, which managed to highlight the $300 postage line, but glossed over many other expenses, such as the office expenses for $16,000. It's not a huge amount of money, that $16,000, but there's a lot of that. It looks like a lot of bloat in the budget, and I think the public deserves better. Fourthly, somebody earlier mentioned that aiming for zero profit. I will tell you that encourages waste, and I think that's part of why there's so much bloat in all of our budgets. The goal should be to be as efficient as possible. Any incremental funds can be put back into the school district, into teaching, or returned to taxpayers. Thank you.
And just to clarify, I didn't say most teachers won't qualify. I said some won't. But I do not know what those numbers are or if it's a majority of teachers. Are there any other? No. All right, we're going to adjourn to closed session at 11:36 a.m. Trustee Lambert, your microphone is still on. It's got a little switch to the top when the green light is on. November 21st.